Good morning, everybody. This is Keith Yang from Auction Point in California. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us today for the Auction Point 2013 Q4 webinar. And we are fortunate this morning to have with us Jerry Anderson, who is the chairman of the Auction Point Event Committee. Some of you may know Jerry, but in case you don't, I'll briefly introduce him. He was formerly president of Sperry Van Ness International, and prior to that, the president of another national brokerage firm. And so he knows a little bit about commercial real estate. And the purpose of the event committee, which Jerry chairs, is to act as a resource for all of you all during the auction process. So with that, Jerry, if you wouldn't mind opening up the webinar.
Well, I'll be happy to. And Keith, thank you very much for inviting me to today's call. And I'm very honored to be part of the event committee and then chair the event committee. And I guess the reason that I was asked to chair the committee by AuctionPoint was because of what Keith just said. I do have 35 plus years in the commercial real estate industry, but probably more importantly to everybody that's on this line today is I've been involved in a number of events now. I've been involved as a broker in an AuctionPoint event. And I've also been involved as a seller in an AuctionPoint event. So I just want to make a couple opening comments for you. First of all, this is a strong online platform that works. It drives buyers to a date certain time frame in terms of their due diligence, and it pushes them to make a bid. And of course, your job as a broker or as a seller and having hired a broker is to make sure that those buyers have adequate time to really look at their due diligence items. So what you're going to hear today is how all that unfolds. But I want to warn those of you that are on the line as a broker. There's no magic whiffle dust to this. Yes, it's a strong online platform. Yes, there'll be a lot of national advertising. Yes, there'll be a lot of support. But it's all going to come down to how you work those prospective bidders, those buyers that are doing the due diligence on your asset. So pay attention, dive in head first. I will tell you that it works, and I will also say to you that the Q4 time frame works a little better than mid-year. So, and we experienced that in 2012. The assets in 2012 Q4 got a lot more activity than the auction mid-year, although the auction mid-year worked. I sold a property at auction. It works. You'll hear me talk about that as the call goes along. But Keith, how about some details for those of us on the line today about the upcoming event?
Thank you, Jerry. I'd be happy to. So everybody should be looking at my computer screen right now in the AuctionPoint 2013 Q4 homepage. Jerry mentioned the timeline, and I'm going to show that to you right now. So as I scroll down, you should be looking at the event timeline. And one of the things you'll notice is that we are very close to the asset submission deadline. On Monday, this coming Monday, we are going to close the doors to new assets. We are going to aggregate the assets that we have so far and release the inventory of real estate to the public that are going to be auctioned through this event. And after that, for the next 2 months, so mid-September to mid-November, we are going to be, AuctionPoint is going to be marketing the event, marketing the individual assets, and working with you to drive buyers to the auction and to your individual listings for auction. During that time, we're asking all the buyers to perform due diligence, conduct their property inspections, and do everything they need to do in order to enter into binding bidding on November 12th, 13th, and 14th. And so during this marketing period, what are the buyers going to see? I'd like to show that to you next. So beginning in mid-September, when a buyer comes to the site, they're going to have access to a list of properties. And you're looking at that right now. These are some of the properties that are going to be part of the event, and some are test properties. But I want to show you how this works. When a buyer comes to the site, they'll have access to the entire list. And they can filter or sort by property type or by region or by doing some quick searching for a broker or different facets of the property. For instance, if I was an office buyer, I might click on this office link, and the list will automatically sort to show me only office properties. And if I were to only want to look at office properties in the Midwest, for instance, I would further drill down and only be presented with those options. So we make it very easy for the buyers to find the types of properties in the markets they're looking for. Now, what happens if a buyer identifies a listing that they're interested in? At that point, what they would do is click on this green Details and Bidding button, and that takes them to what's called an auction website. And we've created a sample here for you to take a look at. I've just clicked on an auction website, and this is a test website that we're working on for Sperry Van Ness. And you're going to notice two things. There is information about the auction, but you're also going to notice that it's branded at this point for the brokerage. So the broker is front and center when a buyer comes to the auction website. At this point, they're looking at the property and they're dealing with the broker. AuctionPoint stays behind the scenes. We're running the technology and answering any questions relative to the auction, but we're letting the buyer really learn about the real estate. You'll also notice that the website address here, AuctionPoint.com/100Main, offers another way for the buyer to get to the auction website. They can just type that right into the address bar and they'll be here directly, or they can go to AuctionPoint.com, look through the property list, and find your property that way. Now, put your buyer hats on. You've been invited to the event. You've identified a listing that you may be interested in, and now you're looking at some basic information about the property. And one of the key things that we always stress is that the starting bid must be at a level that's attractive to buyers. Now, it's different from the typical asking price, which is a wish price. The seller hopes that they're able to get an asking price. Well, the starting bid is different. It's converse to that. It's at such a low number that it's really a no-brainer for the buyer to come to the site and say to himself or herself, of course I'd buy it at, in this case, $985,000 or $23 per square foot. That's a no-brainer. And we want to make that so appealing and compelling to the buyer that they'll come to the site and they'll want to do more research on this property and opportunity. And so if I was a buyer, or if you were a buyer, you might want to take a look at the due diligence materials. So I will next click on this tab. And at that point, our system stops you and says and wants to know who you are. So I've set up a test account for myself called buyer@test.com. And I'll enter in my password. And you'll see that because the system recognized who I was, it let me into the due diligence room. And now I'm off to the races. I can do my due diligence. I can look at further property details. So I'll click on that tab. And the property details tab offers the buyer much deeper information about the property. So here they'll have a chance to look at interior photographs. They'll look at maps. An offering memorandum, in this case, has been posted, and a much deeper description of the opportunity. So we're inviting the buyer to do their homework prior to the bidding date. And I'll take you back to the due diligence room, and you'll see we've posted a bunch of due diligence information that any buyer would want to know before he or she bids on the property. So phase 1 reports, if you have them, surveys, etc. We've also posted to the auction website a purchase and sale agreement. Why did we do that? So I'll click here, and you'll see that we have asked the buyers to download the purchase and sale agreement and review it prior to the bidding date, because the PSA is going to contain the terms that are acceptable to the seller. When will the property close? What title company are we going to use? How much is the amount of the earnest money deposit? That has all been pre-negotiated and put into this purchase and sale agreement, and there will be no further negotiation following the auction date. So we ask all the buyers to look at the purchase and sale agreement the due diligence materials, and all the information about the property. Now, obviously, they're going to be contacting you as a broker with additional questions, and perhaps they'll want to take a tour of the property or want to take a tour of the market area, and that's where you stepped in. This is not a pure online auction. Even though we call it an online auction, much of the interaction is going to happen live, via phone calls, via face-to-face meetings. We want you to understand who the bidder pool is, or what the bidder pool is, prior to the auction date. Now, let's say that I'm interested in bidding on this property as a buyer. So I'll take you back to the auction room, and you'll see here that this auction has been scheduled to run on November 12th. Now, prior to that date, I've done all my due diligence. I've probably toured the property. You've pre-qualified me that I'm a legitimate buyer. Now, I want to get a bidder number and bid on the 12th. So I'll click on this yellow Get a Bidder button, and it's going to take me to a page that requires me to post what's called a winner's deposit. Now, what is a winner's deposit? That is simply an amount of money that goes non-refundable the moment I win the auction. In this case, it's been set at $5,000, but we can set that as high or as low as you and your client wishes. Depends on the size of the asset and what our goals are. We can set it to a very high amount, and that's going to almost guarantee that the winner will close the transaction, but it's also going to shrink our buyer pool, our bidder pool, just a bit. Or we could set it to a modest amount, say $5,000, and that's going to allow anybody to participate. And typically, if unless your client has a gun to their head in terms of a maturity date or something like that, we recommend that we not make the terms so onerous that it prevents people from participating. So if I post this winner's deposit, let me show you what the auction room looks like on auction day. So I'm now clicked over to another test site that's been set up to be running today. And you'll see that there are 42 minutes left in this auction. And a bidder number 6176 is the current high bidder. And this auction is going to end at 9:30 today or 5 minutes after the last bid. That means that if I come in at 9:29 and enter in a bid, the clock will automatically reset for 9:34. Okay, so I'll just show you how this works. The next bid increment has been set at 2140, so I'll go ahead and enter that in right now. And
Keith, I want to mention. Keith, I want to mention one thing as you're showing how the actual bidding activity takes place. All of us as brokers receive the information of those prospects when they register their email to get the due diligence. So up until this point, brokers, you're in constant communication, or you certainly should be, with all these prospects that are getting ready to bid and do exactly what Keith is showing you now.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Jerry. That's absolutely right. I kind of bypassed and let me take you back there right now because I think that's an important point. I'm going to take you back to the prior screen. I had already pre-registered, but had I not registered, the system would have required me to input my contact information, name, address, phone number, etc., and also indicate my role in the transaction. So am I a principal buying this for myself, or am I a broker? And if so, what is the name of my client? And as soon as I register for the event, the broker will receive an email with all that information so that you can reach out to the buyer and answer any questions and engage them in the process. And so you will have access to all of this information prior to the bidding, which I just showed you. And with that said, this might be a good time for me to show you the back of the house. What do you have access to? So now we're going to remove our buyer hats and put on our broker hats and really talk about what we are doing as brokers and as an auction company prior to the bidding window. So I'm going to flip over to something called Google Analytics. What is this? What is this chart we're looking at? Well, AuctionPoint embeds each auction website with a code which allows us to measure traffic coming to the site. And this is very, very helpful to you to measure what are the results of our marketing, meaning AuctionPoint's marketing, and your marketing, because you are going to be doing local level marketing, and as you send out your flyers or your email blasts, you will be able to measure how many people are coming to your site, what are they looking at, where are they coming from, how long are they spending, and so this will give you a very good overview over the 7-week marketing period, what's going on with your auction. You'll see that in this case, 439 people came to this auction website, which is a great number. You'll be able to further drill down to the individuals who have registered for your auction. So next, I've clicked on a tool called Registered Users, which we will provide you access to. So not only are you going to know how many people are coming to your site and what they're doing, but you're going to know the names and phone numbers of those who have actually registered. So not only do you get an email in real time, but you'll be able to track them using our tools. So what you are looking at is an actual list of people who have come to an auction and registered. You'll be able to download this to an Excel spreadsheet. This information is now yours, and you are at this point able to do what you frankly do best, which is to reach out to these prospects and find out who they are and whether they're going to participate in the auction, and pitch them on the merits of the property. Now, many of these will be tire kickers. They are just looky-loos or bottom feeders or people that may not participate in the auction, but many of them will be interested in the auction. They'll be driven to the event by AuctionPoint, by your marketing efforts, and you'll be able to capture this information and really use it and utilize it to make sure that you've got proper activity prior to the auction event, and relay this information to your client so that your seller knows exactly what's going on prior to the auction date. What we want to prevent are any surprises. So if there's not enough activity, should we be adjusting our marketing? Should we be adjusting our pricing? And what are these folks saying? Maybe it's a great asset, but we've priced it too high. And we'll find out once you talk to all these buyers. Okay, so that's the list of registered users. I'm next going to click on this button called Qualified Bidders. And once I do that, you will see the registered users organized by those who have put down their credit cards in order to bid on auction day. And so I'm going to click on Authorize to Bid, and you'll see that those that have put down the $5,000 in this case have been moved from no to yes. So now we have a very good idea of who's going to be bidding on auction day. Not only do we know the numbers, but you will have had conversations with each and every one of these bidders. So you'll know who they are, where their source of funds is going to come from, and in a lot of cases, how high they're going to bid. And you'll give that information to your client so that your client understands and is not surprised by what's going to happen on auction day.
Yeah, I think the phrase there, Keith, is that I think the phrase there is that the broker is really the point of contact for that critical role in the auction.
Absolutely. So the broker plays a very critical role in the auction. Unlike other auction platforms that you may have heard of where you kind of give your listing up and stand back, you play a very critical role in AuctionPoint auctions. What else are you doing? Not only are you the point of contact, but you are actually helping to market this auction. Now, remember, AuctionPoint does marketing on a national level, on a state and regional level, but you really are the expert in your local markets. And what are you doing down at the local level? Let me show you some samples of what brokers have done to market their auction listings in prior auctions. So I've just put on the board a very simple sign that a broker has created large writer and pasted it over their existing sign. So the messaging changes. This listing is not just for sale. Call me with any questions or make me an offer. Now it's for sale by auction, and you'll see the word auction highlighted in red here with the auction website, AuctionPoint.com / the M2 in this case, or it could be the address of the property. So you are helping drive local traffic to the website. Next, I'll show you a sample flyer that a broker has prepared. So again, it changes. It's not just for sale, it's for sale by auction, and there is a definitive auction date and a low starting bid. So it creates an excitement via the low starting bid and a sense of urgency via the auction date. Buyers now understand if they don't act now, the opportunity is going to be unavailable. And last, I'll show you a sample email blast that a broker has put together for one of his auction listings. And you'll see right here they're referencing the item number in the auction, but they're driving buyers directly to their auction via the auction website. Okay, so those are some samples of what you might be doing during the auction event to drive some of your buyer clients to the auction. Now, at this point, let's talk a little bit about pre-auction sales, because at the end of the day, we're all interested in selling these properties, and a lot of sales actually occur prior to the auction date. And how does that work? So I just put back on my screen the auction website showing that this bidding is going to occur on November 12th. Now, what happens if a buyer calls you up prior to the 12th and says, I'd love to buy this property, but I don't want to compete on auction day, so what's the number? That's a great thing, a great conversation to have. You can use the auction as leverage to negotiate a pre-auction offer, and this happens in about a third of the cases where properties going to auction are actually sold preemptively via preemptive offers, just like I've described. Now, when we engage in these conversations, we make it very clear make a few things very clear to the buyer. First of all, this $985 that I'm showing you, that's just a starting bid. The reserve price is going to be a higher number, and we will need to negotiate that in order for us to present something to the seller. We're going to ask the buyers to put up some non-refundable monies, earnest money deposit, because we can't cancel this auction and give the buyer a free look. That would stop the momentum that we're creating. And the last thing is, you all know that AuctionPoint gets paid a 2.5% buyer premium at the close of escrow. We will ask the buyer to acknowledge that he or she is responsible for that. So if we can get a deal done prior to the auction event, that's a great thing. And the beauty of all of this is that you have access to all of the data that I just showed you. So you know whether there's going to be 100 people bidding on auction day or only 2. And so we can adjust our negotiating posture depending on what the data is showing you. And the buyer does not have access to that information. All he or she knows is that if they wait too long, this thing could be gone.
And you know, okay, Keith, that was exactly what happened to me in the Q12. I was in the Q12 auction event as a seller. And, I was working with a broker, one of the brokers that works for me, because I don't often like to represent my own property. And we had really only about what we felt, at least the broker agreed to, were 3 highly qualified buyers chasing my asset. Again, I'm a seller. And when it really came down to it, we didn't think that number 2 and number 3 were really all that interested. So we went to one of the bidders when they raised their hand and said, would you accept an offer pre-auction? We don't really want it to go to auction. It was a beautiful thing for us. So we breathed a sigh of relief, and we quickly negotiated with that bidder a pre-auction sale. and it was a price that to a seller, myself as a seller, was acceptable, and we closed it, and all was well and good. I was afraid if we went to the bidding in that example that we might not get the activity I wanted. So having that knowledge and having the broker have intimate knowledge and having worked with all three of those prospective buyers was critical to me as a seller making a decision.
That's a great point, Jerry. Now let's talk about how else are we going to sell these assets? We just mentioned a statistic. About a third of them sell prior to the auction. Now, when we looked at our analytics and our closings, another third of them actually sell via the bidding window. So that's what I'm showing you right now, via online bidding. Now, what happens, you'll see in this case that the reserve has not been met. Okay, what happens if the auction ends right now? The current bid is 2140. I'm the high bidder. And if nobody else bids, I'm the high bidder, but I have not hit the reserve price set by the seller. So what happens? Well, what happens is that a lot of brokers in this situation would come to me as a buyer, ask me to sign a contract at 2140, ask me for a non-refundable deposit that would be non-refundable if we could get a deal done, and present that to the ownership. And there's a post-auction period of time within which another third of the deals get negotiated. So those are post-auction sales where bidding occurs but the reserve is not met, and the buyer and the seller are able to come to terms following the auction. And that's fine too. A lot of times sellers have expectations about pricing that get readjusted and reset and lowered, frankly, because they're looking at the data, they're understanding everything that AuctionPoint and the broker are doing, and they watch the bidding and understand who the buyers are and have full access to the information and realize, you know what, I'm not going to get my reserve price. I have a few buyers that are interested in the property, so let's negotiate a deal following the auction. And that's a great situation too, post-auction sales. So that concludes my demonstration of the platform. And before we stop the recording, Jerry, do you have any concluding comments for us?
Well, I do. I just want everybody on the line to know that this is a very powerful and it's an effective way to sell real estate. However, it's not just a sit back and wait for something to happen type approach. It does take work on the broker's part. If there's anything, those of you that are on the line as sellers, those of you as brokers, sellers, you need to make sure that your brokers are in constant communication with anybody that looks at any of the due diligence material on your asset. And broker, you will have emails, you'll have phone numbers, but it takes more than just a quick email to these prospects. You need to actually work the crowd, if you will. But if you do it right and if you work hard, this property, your asset's going to be exposed to a national audience, and it will generate a fair market value for you. You're going to be able to have people come forward and offer you what the market value for your property is. So it works. I can share that with you as someone that's used the system as a broker and someone that's benefited from the system as a seller. So we thank you for being with us today. Those of you that have assets in the event, you'll be talking to us on a weekly basis as the event unfolds. But thank you for your time and attention today.